All right, guys, welcome to the presentation today. And we are going to be talking about, just as the thumbnail said, we're going to be talking about the controversy surrounding the Jermaine Bass defense. We're going to be talking about what those are. We're going to be talking about what his defense is, what his defense isn't. And we're going to be getting into this. So, first off, what are the controversies? What am I talking about here? Well, there's some controversy here because there's a lot of confusion. Because originally, when Jermaine Bass gave his original statements, as we heard yesterday by the police who came on scene, Jermaine Bass told the police that he had been emptying his magazine of his gun and the gun accidentally discharged. Of course, when the police go and investigate that claim, they find out that there were 5 shots discharged, and they see that it's a very unlikely situation, right? Now, fast forward to the trial. Now, years have passed, and the defense, the state, and the police investigate this thing and disprove the likelihood of what Jermaine Bass said, and they immediately assume that there's a sinister explanation, and that they find out that Jermaine Bass and his wife were having domestic problems. They were having marital issues, that Jermaine Bass had left the marital residence, left his kids there unattended, and went out to stalk her at a family dinner, or, well, it was a dinner she went to with her family, on her side of the family. And we find out that he strangely pulls her over on the side of the road, asks if she's been drinking, and then leaves, goes home, and then this situation occurs. And the police attribute that this must be some culmination of Jermaine Bass losing his mind because he's upset because his wife is leaving him, and he decides, I'm going to off my kids. And somehow this is part of some diabolical plan that he has that is going to punish her for, you know, leaving him. Anyways, of course, that theory that the state is trying to present comes with problems, and one of the problems is well, when you look at Jermaine Bass's behavior afterwards, although it is somewhat strange and he is somewhat calmer than maybe what you would expect, there is concern when the officers that are on the scene say yes, he was asking that his son JJ get uh, tended to, that he seemed to be concerned about JJ um, getting tended to. Now, strangely enough, though, he is not talking about the daughter who's upstairs in the bunk, who he has to know because he brought JJ down, has been shot. Strangely enough, it appears there's evidence that's being concealed. There's a teddy bear that's put over a large amount of the blood, and he isn't necessarily straightforward right away with everything that's happening. He does eventually say, hey, look, this was an accident. I accidentally discharged my firearm, shot her, shot my son. But ultimately, again, doesn't make much sense. Now, then you flip to the mom, and of course, the mom isn't having reactions that you would think are consistent with what the state's saying either, because she isn't talking about Jermaine Bass as a shooter. She isn't saying, bring the police out here and arrest this SOB. She isn't telling the neighbor, hey, my husband just shot my kids. She's asking for an ambulance. She's saying, please, I don't know what the hell's going on right now. I need an ambulance. She's in a panic, right? And then once she, all the dust settles, she gets a lawyer. She refuses to turn over her phone. She refuses to let JJ, the son, make a statement. Eventually, when he does make a statement, he claims he doesn't remember anything. And all of this is strange behavior for a woman that, by all accounts, according to the state, has a husband who decided to off the 2 kids. Not to mention that if he's in some deadly homicidal rage, why is she still walking around? Why did he not shoot her? Why did he not finish the son off? None of that makes any sense. Remember, the dad out in Ohio is chasing, when he was in a homicidal rage trying to off his kids, he's chasing them down in the field. He's certainly not holding them in the living room. So all of these things beg the question of what was actually going on. Now, as we've gotten into the physical evidence, it's become clear that there are some problems, right? And what are some of the problems? Some of the problems are, we figured out that the gun was clearly being stored in the kid's closet. We figured out that if you look at some of the trajectory could be, doesn't mean it is, but it could be consistent with it coming from a downward or from a downward to upward positioning, which could support that the 8-year-old did this. You see kind of a completely haphazard firing pattern, as was laid out by the crime scene reconstructionist. Now, they haven't specifically said these things, but it's just clear from looking at the way the crime scene's laid out, looking at the way this thing went down. But yet we know that Jermaine, his wife, are experienced firearm people who would never present things this way. And if he was going to shoot both of his children, he'd most certainly finish off both of his kids. But the daughter, she's hit. The son, again, appears his wounds could be consistent with ricocheting, a bullet ricocheting around the room and striking him and ultimately causing damage, the damage that was seen. So what is Jermaine Bass's defense at trial? Jermaine Bass's defense is going to be, and it absolutely is, that his 8-year-old son did this. Now, his 8-year-old son today claims he doesn't remember what happened, and he claims that he cannot testify because he doesn't have any memory, and he's had some mental deficits develop because of this shooting. So as a result, the defense and prosecution as well is not going to get any benefit from this child. But it opens up the opportunity that the defense can try to argue that this child was responsible, that he got a hold of his father's gun. One thing leads to another. It discharges 5 times, which would absolutely, you could see, a kid who gets a hold of his gun doing boom, 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 boom. And that unfolds. So the controversy, obviously, right now, I think the confusion that you see that's going on right now in the chat and comments and all around this case is the early reports were that he accidentally discharges the firearm when he's loading a magazine. Now it's changed. It's now changed to where they're saying he's completely innocent and he had nothing to do with the shooting, and that this shooting had everything to do with the 8-year-old child getting a hold of the firearm. Now, obviously, I've heard some comments say, well, listen, okay, doesn't that mean that he could still be convicted of the charges that he's charged with? If that's what it is, he should have been responsible enough to prevent well, no, that's not what he's charged with. There's no elements of the crime that would meet that. So the jury would have to essentially do their own form of jury nullification, in the sense that they would say, you know what, we don't care that he's innocent. We're still going to convict him of this simply because he was a negligent guy. He shouldn't have left his kids unattended. And you know what? He's going to get what he deserves. So this is going to be a very controversial verdict, I think. This is going to be a difficult case for this jury when they get it, because there is a lot of questions. And remember, these cases at the end of the day have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Are there reasonable doubts? Is there a doubt that a reasonable individual and a reasonable mind could see when you go back there and you say, is it possible that Jermaine Bass's son could have been the shooter? And can you say without any reasonable doubts that that didn't happen? And I think it's going to be very difficult for a jury of 12 to return to that jury room and say, you know what, that's not possible that could have happened, especially once the defense gets done, they put up their case, their experts, their version of events. Because again, the defense doesn't have to prove that's what happened. They just have to prove that it's a potential but it's a potential uh, way to explain what happened and that it could have happened. Enough that the jury would say, well, I can't rule it out. Um, and I can't rule out that Jermaine Bass did this. As a result, I'm in the middle, and there's a instruction for this. There's a way our criminal justice system deals with a situation like that, and that's called not guilty. That's called the presumption of innocence. The presumption of innocence will rule that conflict, any conflict of evidence, any conflict of outcomes. If you can't figure it out, you break in the favor of the defendant and you go home and you find them not guilty. It's the job of the state for them to close that doubt, to take you up the steps, walk you through the door and say, you're guilty or he's guilty, and get the jury to guilty without them hesitating or vacillating or having any type of issue with voting guilty. And in this case, I don't think that's going to be the case, because I think there's going to be a lot of doubt, especially once it really becomes clear, when this defense gets done with their cross-examination of the witnesses and they put their own case on, and maybe perhaps we hear from Mr. Bass himself. I think this is going to be a case that's going to absolutely be a controversial verdict. But again, it's possible the jury is the finder of fact or the trier of fact. They get to decide what's fact and what's not. If they were to go back to the jury room and say, you know what, I don't care about any of that. In my opinion, he should have been more responsible. Whether he fired the gun or not, I don't care. We're convicting him. They could go back and do that. Or they could say, you know what, I don't think it's likely at all that this 8-year-old child did this. There's only one person, unless they're going to put it on the mom. And since they're not going that direction, at that point, Jermaine Bass is all that's left. So, but I think that in this case, the way it's going to get presented, the things that are going to come out, I think it's going to be a difficult one. Anyways, let me know your thoughts. So far, what are you thinking? Do you think there's any chance, based on what you've heard, based on what you've seen, based on the testimony that you've reviewed, do you believe there's any chance that JJ could have been the shooter, and that this could have been an accidental disaster mistake on the part of the son? Let me know. Anyways, guys, till we talk again, let justice prevail. I'll talk to you soon.